Exactly. So our next speaker is Sharyn Creighton, and Sharyn is a community occupational therapist and a dementia educator. And Sharyn's going to challenge us to think beyond restrictive labels because, as Tolkien has said, not all who wander, and I'm putting that in speech marks, are lost. So, Sharyn, we're really, really excited to be hearing from you today.
Kia ora, Susan. Can you see me okay at this end?
Yeah.
Yeah. We have some technical problems, so I've got Bevan is going to be clicking through my slides for me. So kia ora, everyone. Thank you. I've been quite, incredible speakers, both Sarah and Jane. So thank you. I guess what stood out for me probably even more was just some of the things when we talk about the challenges in universal design. And as an occupational therapist, it just, affects us deeply because we go out and assess people in these so-called over 60s units and we think, oh dear, there's so much they could have done to make this more accessible for people. And of course, there isn't funding to fix them once they're built. So, and as I approach that age, I think also that, it's affecting all of us, not just those with dementia. So, as Susan said, today I've been asked to talk to you about wandering in dementia in the context of supportive environments. So, I'm taking a slightly different slant. I want to unpack the word wandering. Could I have the next slide? Thanks, Bevan. As we know, the words we use can be really powerful, and I'm going to explore what can be implied or misunderstood when we use the word wandering. And then I'm going to explore perhaps the reasons why a person might walk. And thirdly, I hope to talk about some of the strategies to assist a person with dementia and also to support carers when walking becomes a risk or a problem. As we know, slide 3, thank you. Although the word wandering is often used to describe walking by people with dementia, the term actually suggests that there is no aim to the person's walking, which is not actually the case. There is nearly always a reason why a person with dementia wants to walk. An important point to make is that there's nothing wrong with walking. In fact, it is unreasonable to expect a person should be happy to spend the time just sitting. I certainly am not a sitter. And behaviour is another word I want to unpack from the perspective of a person with dementia. Unfortunately, the word behaviour is often used with negative connotations to describe the actions of a person with dementia. And as you will be aware, a behaviour is often a person with dementia's way of communicating something they cannot understand or put into words. It is a reaction. It is not a wandering behaviour. So I guess to put that into context, I like to think of wandering behaviour as just simply walking. When it becomes a problem, it is often a person with dementia's way of communicating something, maybe an unmet need. It is not just a sign of dementia. So I'll give you a few minutes just to read and answer these statements amongst yourselves. How many of you answered yes? To all of them, I scored 10 out of 10. A person with dementia obviously is no different than you or I. They walk for the same reasons. They also bump into things. The only difference is their brain is not working the same way as ours. Next slide. Some reasons why a person with dementia might walk include the following. Some of these are quite obvious. They're lost, trying to find something. They're looking for something. Perhaps they always check, at that time of the day, check their letterbox or pick the children up from school. Perhaps they're in pain. Perhaps they're lonely. Perhaps they're bored. And maybe they just simply enjoy walking. If we know the person well, or the person can indicate in some way, either verbally or non-verbally, we often can work together and find out what is going on for that person. But obviously that's not always that simple. We don't always know why a person is walking, and that is why all of us have to be detectives. And I know a lot of you will resonate with that. Next slide. So I guess this is where I perhaps look at it a little bit differently. We've had lots of good information about the physical environment, but I'm going to, without repeating a lot of what's been said, focus a little bit more on the human environment. So first of all, what can we do to help? Keeping a journal is, or a notebook, whatever, if it's in a care setting, it would be within the notes. Some way of identifying if there's any patterns. When do they walk? What happens before they walk? What happens when they start walking? What time of day? What do they say? What are their facial expressions? What are the gestures that indicate they want to walk or need to walk? So, as we know, memory loss can certainly drive the need to walk. How many of us go to find something and can't find it, or can't remember why we've gone into the room and then turn around and come back again? So a person with dementia might be on a journey to find something, have a goal in mind, but then they get halfway there and they can't remember why they're doing that, or they perhaps get lost. And then they might search for an item that they have misplaced, or they believe someone has taken it. Some things, and this has been touched on a little bit, I was reminded of it when Sarah Talks showed us that picture of a kitchen with the items being visible. It is useful to place favourite personal items in an obvious place, and perhaps where they can see them, but not in a drawer or cupboard, unless you do have glazed cupboards. Or maybe a large container or basket where you can put things. I do know there is some problems with that because sometimes a person with dementia will then hide them. Simple labels can help, and as Sarah also said, it's better to use sans serif font and sentence case and with a pictorial element if possible. Feeling lost is another reason someone may walk. If they're in unfamiliar surroundings, particularly when they move into a care home, they may walk and they obviously feel quite lost and quite scared. They feel disorientated. And I know with time that can help, but as was mentioned before, familiar items in their, from home in their room certainly helps. Old photographs, old being, I guess, the key word, memories from the past, perhaps not new photos of people or even of themselves because they won't remember that that's them. Familiar is the key word. I just want to share with you a story of a woman whose family thought they were doing the best and they moved her into a beautiful apartment and they thought, oh dear, she needs a new toaster, she needs a new jug. Mum's had these for 50 odd years and they're worn out. So of course, once she moved into an apartment, she had no idea what was the jug and what was the toaster and how to use them. So it was a very expensive exercise for them. Leaving the bathroom door open with a light on may help. And as we said before, a sign and a picture on the door at eye level can also help. Just remember that as we become more stooped and we have a downward gaze, the signage needs to be lower than it would normally be. About 1.2 metres is suggested, but of course that's individual. As also, I'm just repeating, but a focus group contained people with dementia and everyone recognised that toilet sign. It was a small focus group and it was in Scotland, but it was the most common toilet symbol with the shaded flooring, and it was chosen unanimously. But it would be interesting to do that little bit of research in our own country. As was mentioned, themed corridors, tonal contrasts, and also black holes are really important. You know that, as we know, sensor mats can be great, but certainly not grey ones or black ones because they look like a hole and someone will jump over them. Confusion about time, that's probably self-explanatory, but a large clock can help, and there's different types of clocks. I see on my screen here now I've got a black circle, but that did look like an analog clock. I think, don't know where that clock went, but it's no longer there. The key is to have the person involved in the choices that work for them. I know one family member got a clock and thought it was great. It was one of those expensive ones, but it didn't work. So if you can trial, it's safer to do that. And the person will perhaps take some ownership of the clock if they're involved in choosing it. Another thing, an idea one family member had was putting a note beside someone at bedtime saying, it is nighttime. And that was quite large and it was clear and in the right font it was on the wall actually beside their bed. But once again, involve the person, perhaps put it in their words, ask them what would help them to go to sleep and what would help them to remember that this is their bed. So phrase it in their words. And then one example I had of where it perhaps didn't work for someone, if having a night light, they liked their curtains open, which is interesting because there was a garden outside, but then they got lots of reflections and then they got very confused. So having lights on outside can confuse a person. I won't talk about why people with dementia walk at night. That's a topic in itself. But as we know, good hygiene habits, and there's lots of other strategies can be trialled. Next slide, please. Pain and discomfort often is a reason why someone's walking. How often do we walk when we're in pain? Or when we've got something on our mind? My husband paces outside quite often when he's trying to think through something. So it could be because they're unwell. It could be also that they're uncomfortable. Maybe they want to go to the toilet. Maybe they're wearing ill-fitting clothing. Maybe it's the environment. Is it too hot? Is it too cold? Poor lighting, bad smells, too noisy. There's multiple reasons. Restlessness and agitation and anxiety. There's a lot of people do walk around when they're restless, when they're worried, when they've got anxiety. Some people often fidget and tap. That's another thing. They're repetitive movements. And as we know, it's often more noticeable in the end of the day or later in the day when their brains are tired. So it's often really hard to tease out why this is. I often think, imagine if your memory was failing and you couldn't quite work out what was going on, and then you can't use the strategies you used to do or do the activities that you used to do to calm yourself down or help you relax in the past. And so then imagine being in that head. It must be quite frightening. There are a lot of calming strategies. I won't go into a big list, but listening to quiet music, rocking is a really good one. I know rocking chairs in care homes sometimes are seen as a safety issue, but if you can introduce some sort of rocking chair, honestly, if the person is used to doing that at home, it possibly will work as well later on in life. Things like a hand massage can help. The one thing I just want to touch on around anxiety and restlessness and irritation and agitation is speak to the emotion. It's really easy to tell someone to sit down. Now, if I was told to sit down and I was pacing, that would only make me angry. And I just want you to consider that yourself. If I'm worried, I want someone to say, tell me about it, what's wrong? And a person with dementia is no different. Sometimes I think they don't get an opportunity to express their emotions freely because we divert them instead with a cup of tea. And we say, never mind, dear, you'll be fine. And sometimes I think we need to go deeper than that. And it's individual, but you'll know, and it's worth trying. It's worth trying because it may work. So, for example, they might be looking for something. They might be looking for a loved one who has died. So encourage them to talk about it. Show you're listening rather than correcting them. For example, if they are looking for their mother, ask them about their mother. And that may settle a person and it may reduce their need to walk. Next slide, please. So relieving boredom. It could be because they're bored, but I know that they're walking, but I also know that it is really hard to engage someone whose attention span is really short. So once again, they might say they're bored, but there might be a lot of activities to do. So it's a tricky one. But sometimes if they can feel involved, that they've got a sense of purpose, and we all need a sense of purpose, and a person with dementia is obviously no different. So if it can be normal everyday tasks, things that are left out, like setting a table, it can be a routine, but if the things are left out so they can see, or that's what we do, or maybe a visible washing line, or maybe brooms to sweep, folding washing, that's seen quite often, preparing vegetables. It doesn't matter if it's done wrong and you can't use the vegetables, but they're everyday tasks that are normal, and it does give a sense of purpose. Obviously, you know, diversional therapists and activity programs do a wonderful job, and that definitely helps. Lack of physical activity. A lot of people that go into care, especially some of the younger ones, they have energy to spare. And it's really hard if they've been fit and active and they were movers, you know, and they just like to be busy. A regular walking group is a must, and I've seen some wonderful walking groups out there that, you know, the lovely residents so miss it when they don't, you know, the routine doesn't happen. But grounds with suitable paths for walking are essential, and an indoor environment with a circuit route is also desirable for wet weather like we've got now. You may find the person wants to walk at the time of day when they used to be about, like maybe when they walked the dog, or when they collected their children, or when they went to work. So try, if you can, to support them with a walk at that time of day. Sometimes it's just easy to say, sit down, you no longer have to pick up the children. But I certainly know how I would respond if I was told that. If you can, let the person walk. Say some things like, I like to walk too. Can I walk with you? Why do you like walking? You're used to being a busy person. It must be difficult when the kids have left home. Once again, speak to the emotion rather than telling the person to sit. And I know sometimes family members can be great by taking someone for a walk and accompanying them. Wanting to leave, that's a huge one. And someone I said just popped up, mentioned VR, and I've mentioned that as well, that there's amazing VR technology out there that can take people on journeys. And I know that technology is expensive, but I've certainly seen some great results when people do use it. There's another advancement in technology as well, and that is in terms of technology for safety devices, trackers and things like that. And I really just want to point you to the Safer Walking website, which I will include with the handout, or with the information that goes with this overhead. Because Safer Walking website, if you are not aware of it, I certainly Google it, and it's got everything you can imagine in terms of IT support, trackers, GPS, motion detectors, wander track, and it's updated regularly, so it's very useful. I'm not sure if I need to go into much detail about this, but I certainly know, you know, within Canterbury we have ID bracelets that we get through Dementia Canterbury. I'm not sure about other areas. You know, name and phone number in their bag or wallet or something that they take with them. And also, if someone still does use a cell phone, some people may know this, that you can put ICE in case of emergency. So you put that in your phone and it will come up to the top of the address and contacts, and that's the person, you know, if they're found, they can ring that number. there's lots of other ideas. Just next slide, please. These are just some things that I've included. I think I've covered those, and just one last slide. Thank you. And I just will share that last thought with you. But thank you.
Just a fabulous, Sharyn. Thank you so much. You know, if you do want a practical approach, occupational therapists are a great person to turn to all the time. So if people do have some questions or comments that they'd like to make, please do pop it in the chat, or if you'd like to raise your hand, we will try to see you.
Susan, can I just add one more thing? I
Yes.
just meant to mention it, and it came into my mind when Sarah was talking. You know, we talked about the lived experience, and the really good book, it's on, I think, the Dementia Foundation website, and that's that one called Talking Sense by Agnes Houston. So if anyone hasn't read that, it's wonderful, and it certainly talks about all those sensory changes and what that, and how she wasn't aware of that. She certainly was aware that her memory was going to be affected, but that's all she thought when she got the diagnosis. So it's written by a UK author with dementia.
Yeah, it is a great resource, and we can put that link in. So Kate's wondering if you are aware of any particular resources that might be particularly relevant for people who are living with a lifelong intellectual disability and have developed a dementia.
Wow. Not off the top of my head, but I'm sure we've got experts that we might be able to look into that, Susan. I'm thinking of Tracy.
Yeah.
She's possibly gone down that avenue, a colleague that works in that field. So we will definitely share her knowledge. Yeah.
We'll research that one and come back to you.
Yes.
Resource
Yes.
list. Lots of thank yous. Yeah, lots and lots of thank yous. And Lynetta also just echoing Carol about the availability of the educational virtual reality as a different use of reality as
Yes.
the tool. And someone also saying how useful they have found a particular type of VR product called Rendeavor.
Yes, yes. So that is the one I'm familiar with, actually. It's used by a couple of the care homes that have got funding for that. And actually, one of my students on Walking in Other Shoes program has done a little bit of research on that. So I want to help her present that, because it's a nice little bit of qualitative findings.
Yeah, and that's one where they can go to different places. Is that right?
And wear the goggles effectively.
Yeah.
And the findings where people became more more talkative. They even use it to find, someone was from the UK and they found their house that was still there in the UK in real time where they grew up. How cool is that?
That is fantastic.
Very cool.
Yeah. And I love the way that you've been echoing the way that familiarity is such a resource to use, the familiarity of things, but also of routines, that we can think of that as being a real strength that we can build into. That I think that's been a real theme that sort of, come through as well. So if we don't have any final questions coming through, I'd just like to give the warmest, most grateful of thank yous to each of our speakers. What an absolutely amazing amount of ideas we've had the chance to hear today. And, we're all going to be going away and having a lot to kind of work through. So just thank you for so much food for thought.